Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us and giving up your lunch hour today. My name is Rachel Barlow. I'm an attorney with the Diamond Law Firm in St. Petersburg, Florida. I'm a recent board certification exam graduate from 2025 and 2024, excuse me. And I'm a member of the Real Property Probate and Trust Law section, specifically a member of the Wills, Trust, and Estate Board Certification Review Course Committee. And it was our idea to put this together today to offer you a chance to hear from recent practitioners who have passed the exam, as well as the chair of the Wills, Trust, and Estate Certification Committee to provide you information about the exam itself, tips for studying, strategies, and hearing from our real life experiences about how we prepared and passed the exam to set you up for success as well. Historically, this opportunity to get information about the exam took place only at the Wills, Trust, and Estates Certification Review course itself, which is coming up here shortly. But we decided we wanted to separate this and provide a longer, broader opportunity, more engaging for question and answers, and to incorporate lawyers who have taken the test and succeeded so that we can provide some insights for you today. So as we jump in, first I'd like to give our amazing panel a chance to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about who they are, their connection to the exam.
I'm Seth Marmore, and I chair the board certification for Wills, Trust, and Estates Committee. We draft the exam. I practice with Park-Yan Marmore in Boca Raton, Florida. I'm a board certified Wills, Trust, and Estates attorney since 1991. So a lot of what you guys do from a practical standpoint on the exam, like using computers, we didn't have 30 years ago. So I'm learning a lot of how you're working on how to do this. I wish all of you a lot of luck.
My name's Denise Casabon. I'm an attorney at Dunwoody, White, and Landon in the Naples office. My practice consists primarily of estate planning and estate of trust administration, and I obtained board certification in 2017.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Bell. I'm an attorney with Delzer, Coulter, and Bell in Port Richey, and my practice focuses strictly on estate planning, probate, and trust administration, no litigation. And I passed the exam in 2024.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joe Percopo. I'm at Dean Mead in Orlando, Florida. I also am transactional, not litigation on the planning side, and I passed the exam just last year.
Awesome. Thank you all for the introduction. And fun fact for Rebecca Bell, she is double board certified in Wills, Trust, and Estates and Elder Law, if anyone else out there is interested in that. Okay. So let's first dive in. I'd like to take some time to talk with you, Seth, about the actual exam itself, the structure of the exam, what makes it up, points and all that. So can you give us first kind of an overview of how is the exam day, the exam itself structured?
One day, 8 hours broken up into two 4-hour sections with 26 multiple choice questions in the first hour, plus 3 essays. And then the second 4-hour section, another 26 multiple choice questions and 3 more essays.
So essentially the exam has a morning component and an afternoon component that have the same number of multiple choice, same number of essays, different questions obviously in each piece. How are the points allocated between the multiple choice and the essays throughout the exam?
Okay, so this is probably the best advice I can give everybody. The multiple choice questions are worth 1 point, which means total of 52 points. The essay questions are worth 24 points each, and times 6 is 142 points. So, and passing is 70%. I will tell you that on the past 3 exams, 95% of the people passed the multiple choice by
Wow.
more than 70%. So
Wow.
an allocation of time, I just told you the answer. don't, we have found a number of people not answering the last the last essay question
Wow.
each at the end of each session.
That's a really important insight to understand because sometimes you get bogged down in the multiple choice, but this is helpful to understand that as far as how it's graded and where the points are allocated, the bulk of the points are sitting inside those essay questions. Who actually grades the exams and how do they go about grading the essay part particularly?
Well, the creation of the exam is done over several months, based on prior questions that have been done over the years. The bank, which is updated continuously, and the essay questions, which also are in the bank, but as law changes, new essays are drafted, and
Okay.
it's all done by the committee reviewing it, and then we have test. Uh, uh, People who volunteer to actually take the exam and give us comments. So we make changes because we have certain rules with respect to the exam. Uh, More, it's not designed to trick, particularly on the multiple choice. There are no negative questions. Okay, there are no if then but this. There are no true or false questions. There is one right answer.
Okay. How many people are on the committee and do you work as a group in deciding which questions make up the bank and how the essays are formatted for that year?
I was going to say is there are 8 people on the committee, a chair, a co-chair, and then 6 people. But other than the title, we all are writing the exams. We are all allocated like a probate administration question, a trust and estates question,
Got
an
it.
essay on. Not going to tell you all the topics, but
Yeah.
yes, on all of the topics, and it's done in teams. So if I draft an essay question, I have a team member who must review and comment and change it. That's before it goes to everybody else. And then we have a live meeting in January during heckling where we go over all of the questions together just to make certain that it's fair and it tests what it's supposed to test.
Yeah. And then for the essays, you had mentioned about the points per essay. I believe it was 24 points per essay. Is that do you all, your team, are then approved by the committee? Is there a grading rubric or something that is used then on the back end for allocating the points on the essay
So when we create the essay, we have to draft the rubric that goes with it.
at the same time?
At the same time, yes, exactly, and with an appropriate answer and oftentimes backup, whether it's a statutory reference or a case law reference, which is case law reference is very unusual. It's almost always a statutory reference to the answer, and oftentimes the questions, and I should say more often than not, the questions are asked in an outline type format. Answer, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? Answer, what about this? As opposed to throwing things against the wall. I will tell you, that's the best way to answer those questions.
That's really helpful. I think there may be sometimes, would you say it's different how you approach answering these essays to maybe a law school exam, or kind of what sets apart an essay answer that is hitting the gold
Yeah.
versus what are we doing?
Well, the expression we used to say, if you don't know the answer, baffle them with bullshit. That will not fly. And
Okay.
but this will not fly. If the question asks for a specific, and I'm throwing something out, how many times did something happen? Answer how many times something happened, and don't say the history of how this happened and why this happened, because there's a reason for it, and it's probably not a good answer to your question, but
No,
uh,
this is helpful because in my office, I'm known as the verbose one in my writing. And so I feel like this is along the lines of you're not getting points for just demonstrating all the things you possibly know under the sun. It is about answering the question that's been presented to you, or multiple if there are parts to the essay itself.
there's always part. Yes, there's
Yeah,
always parts to
always
the
parts.
essays. Yes.
Answer the parts. And I apologize to our attendees. I did not state at the very beginning, we are taking questions. I will do my best to take some throughout, and we are allocating time at the end. The best way to submit your questions is in your Zoom, should be at the bottom, is a Q&A box. That's better than the chat. The Q&A box is best, will send us each of those questions, and we will work our way through them. So please use the Q&A throughout if you have any questions. So thank you, Seth. That was very helpful. Let me ask about some logistic questions. Going into the exam as a test taker, what materials are the test takers allowed to have with them, either at home or bring with them into the testing site in person?
They could bring a copy of the probate code, the trust code, and I was going to say, if it's a reptile committee other than guardianship, you should have those are the statutes you need. And I know that Denise is going to show you the book with
Yeah,
the how she annotated the exam. You can annotate, you can write, you can also bring in the Internal Revenue Code and annotate it, and it's an open book test with respect to that. That doesn't necessarily mean you always have a super amount of time,
right.
but oftentimes you can go, some of the questions you can go right to
Yeah.
uh, your annotation and find it right away, the answer to the multiple
Yeah.
choice question.
I think that's really important to know. You can have your probate code, trust code, they make West and Lexis make specific books that are kind of our wheelhouse of statutes, right? And there's even a separate tax code book that pushes together the trust and estate kind of relevant statutes. You can have it with you, but kind of like from the time in law school, if you're needing to look up everything along the way, that's not what we're looking for here. But they're allowed to have those in there and annotated. What happens when a test taker does not pass the exam the first time? Can they take it again? And do they have review options?
Well, personally, one should put their head down in shame. No, I'm kidding. Uh, no, actually, it's a hard exam, but always ask for the appeal if you're
Okay.
close. Last year, two people appealed who were close. One person, after review, did pass the exam. Uh,
Wow. Okay.
just so everybody knows, we have absolutely no idea whose grades we're passing. We know the names of the people who are taking the exams, but we do not know who is taking those exams. I've been on the committee for 4 years, and I don't find out who passed till you find out who passed.
Yeah. Okay.
Interesting, but definitely appeal. If you think, and you at that point, you get to review your exam, you see the rubric, and you can make your arguments if you think that there's a possibility.
Yeah, that's really important. That's good to know. And you can take the exam more than once. Um, oh, so I see we had a question in our Q&A about where can we find an old bank of question essays and multiple choice questions. And this is an opportunity. I'm going to do a quick share screen and kind of answer this at one time here. So there is not a master bank of all the questions and all the essays of every exam in the past. That just doesn't exist. However, on the Florida Bar website, there over here on the left-hand side among all your options here on the Florida Bar website is information about board certification exams. It's broken down by topic, and there is specifically a page devoted to wills, trusts, and estates law certification exam itself. And what's helpful on here is not only the breakdown of what do you have to do to be able to apply, what are the requirements to be able to apply, when is the application time period, when is it due, when is the exam calendar, and how do you stay recertified. But towards the bottom, there's also this extra tools and information. And here's where you can find what, in my opinion, I believe is one of the most important pieces, which is this is your list of topic areas. This is all, and it's a long one. This is your list of what is up for being tested on in each of the categories. And this is a way you can use this to drive your studying as far as hitting all these marks and the topic areas. But additionally, although it is not a huge bank and it's not everything that's ever existed, the second tab has sample questions. And this at least gives you an idea of this is what the multiple choice looks like, gives you the correct answer. That's nice. How they're tested, and it gives you, let me scroll down here a little further, sorry, sample essay question with a sample answer. Sorry, a lot more than I thought it was going to be. So here's your sample essay question. And you can see multiple parts like we had just talked about, and a model answer. And you can kind of see this is not meant to be a novel of prose here. You're answering the parts to the question and giving you. So this is what's available on the Florida Bar website as far as samples. Okay, so I would like to now move into our next section to start diving in with our panelists who have taken the exam here in the last few years and start talking about studying strategies and prep for the exam itself. So first, for each of our panelists we have here, starting off with you, Denise, can you share overall how you structured your timeline of exam prep and studying? How long did you study, taking time off, working it around your schedule? What was your overall timeline and approach? And let me unmute you here.
Thank you,
Oh,
Rachel. So I started preparing for the exam actually before I even applied to sit for the exam. So there are a number of CLE credits that are required just as part of the application process. So I would listen to the board certification review courses for the year I applied and the 2 years prior. Fortunately, in my firm, we order the CDs every year so that the attorneys can listen to the presentations in the car while they're driving from office to office. So for me, I had the CDs available where if I was in the car, I was listening to those presentations. And I would also, again, leading up to it, if there was a case that came out that was estate interest related, I would print out the case and I would review it. And I would go to the case law updates, and whatever cases I wasn't aware of, I would print them out and review them. And once I was actually approved to sit for the exam, I started studying, really devoting the time around January when
okay.
the exam was in the beginning, about mid-May. So
So about 4 months out,
yeah,
you
correct,
hit it hard.
correct.
But you were already doing once you decided I'm going to apply and I'm going to take this, you started listening to the review course from past years and all that, but then you like
Hunkered down and started studying.
hunkered down around January.
And I would take time on the weekends because I was very busy during the week with client matters. So I would really focus on the weekends. And I did take the week leading up to the exam off so that I wouldn't have to worry about client matters while I'm trying to focus on preparing for the exam.
Yeah. Rebecca, how about you? What was your approach and timeline on how you prepared for the exam? How far out and everything like that?
Sure. It was somewhat similar to Denise. I guess I would probably say maybe about 6 months out, I started studying, but it started more just simply, again, listening to the certification review course. Anytime I happen to have a long commute, so that was my time to listen to that and just kind of kept listening to it over and over again, or maybe focusing, areas that I was, less knowledgeable about, kind of those segments kind of listening to over again. So when you purchase the course online and then or virtual, I guess I forget how the actual options are, but typically you can keep listening to that. That's available. And then even if that time limit passes, you can typically pay an additional fee, less than the original one to keep having it available to listen to. So even if CDs don't work or they're not available anymore, that purchasing, allowing you to kind of keep listening to the recording over and over again. So that's certainly something I focused on. And then, yes, as it came closer, taking the weekends, weekdays, yes, I was still busy during the week with my office work. So as far as time I took off, I think it was just 2 days before the exam. Probably in hindsight, it would have helped to take more off just to really focus and get that intense study just leading up to it. But that's, mainly as far as the time frame that I took, yeah.
Yeah. Joe, how about you? What was your timeline and how you approached your prep?
Certainly. So I started studying specifically for the exam after, well, beginning with the board cert review course and then going forward. Now, last year, the board certification review course was February 21st
Right, it was earlier. Yeah.
during the year. So that's when I started studying. And the way I approached it was kind of after work each night, I'd come home and try to put some time into it. And then certainly on the weekends, Saturday, Sunday, also dedicate some time leading up to the exam. And then I took like a half day before the exam off. But I also have been actively going to reptile meetings
Okay.
that starting in 2019. So a lot of good information is shared at those meetings that I know, case law updates, things like that that are presented at the committee meetings was all things occurring prior. So that was also an added benefit I had where I wouldn't say I considered it like dedicated studying for the exam, but I know it helped leading into it.
It sounds like across the board, similarly, I think I had a similar approach too, which was once I knew I was doing this thing, I was focused on what I was attending at the time and thinking ahead of I got to soak this in because it's going to help with the exam. But then once we got to the review course, you got to those handful of months before the exam started hunkering down. And it sounds like everybody primarily, until we got close to the exam, you were working this around your work schedule and putting in extra time on the weekends or the evenings. I love the diversity though of between Denise and I were like week off. This is all we're doing for, an entire week. Rebecca's like 2 days, okay, I can focus. And Joe's like, meh, I only need the afternoon. But I think that shows that figuring out what works for you on mentally, how much do you need to have that time to separate from your job, billable hours into the exam is helpful to hear. Um, we also heard, Joe, I want to keep you up now on this one. We heard a little bit of some variety on some of the materials that were used. So, Joe, can you talk about what were some of the best resources that you went to as you prepared on the different topics that were going to be tested? And why were those your favorite? Why did they work so well?
For me, it was the board certification review course materials. And look, and also as Denise and Rebecca said, listening to those on audio, whether it was driving in the car or like, during a workout, not as exciting as, your pump up music, but still listening to it on a loop was my approach. And then kind of drilling down into the areas that I thought were my weak spots, the things I didn't do as often or know as well. So those were the ones, or even the written materials I'd go back after maybe listening to a session and then do a deeper dive on. So those were my main focus study materials, other than kind of going through the probate and trust code and probate rules.
Yeah. And I want to come back to that specifically about the code. So we'll come back to everybody about using the code itself and reading through it. But this is helpful. Rebecca, I think you had mentioned you really focused on the certification review course itself, that you listened through the current one multiple times. What can you speak to that and some of the other resources that you used and found helpful to prepare for each of the topics?
Sure. Yeah. So certainly heavy leaning on the review course materials, both the audio, like I said before, and then even, the written materials, the outlines that the speakers created. Even I had some past years too. So just if it wasn't the same speaker, going back and looking at, previous prior years materials on that. And then, like Joe said, I think it is helpful, so whether you're on the executive council of Reptile or not, those committee meetings are open. And I think that's just helpful to be listening in on that. Certainly, I think it's common knowledge that anything new, recent changes in the law or case law, is certainly often tested. So just knowing that material, so whether the legislative update, CLE, or anything that's going to make sure you're familiar with those recent changes that are often tested. And yeah, and then I think as far as, let's say there was a maybe more challenging topic that I felt like I needed a deeper dive in, just getting a
Mhm.
hold of those materials. Like I think we found an outline on the apportionment statute or the elective share, how could it calculate that? So just even sometimes you just found just through talking with, friends or colleagues that there's another outline here that, deeper dive into that and really, focusing on those specific topics that may be weaker on.
Did either of you, as you were working through the review course materials or other CLE materials, did the audio like, was that what sunk in the best, or did you find reading them or both? I think maybe sometimes it depends on what kind of learner we are as to whether or not we're best hearing the lecture versus reading it. So for either of you, kind of, how did that play into it, the audio versus reading through an outline or materials?
Okay, I'll jump in at it's for me, it's both. I think it is true. I think you need to know how much of what type of learner you are, type of thing. So, I mean, obviously, if I'm driving, I can't be looking at the same time of reading the material. So, the ideal situation is you're listening to it and looking at written materials in front of you. But so depending on what was available, what was I could do at the time, but. Yeah, I think reading for me is probably I'm taking in more, obviously, and getting less distracted. And I think one, as far as a strategy, even reading, and I think we've talked about just whether you're annotating as you're reading,
Mhm.
or like I was using I've kind of always just used some type of flashcard technique, whether hard copy or there's, things like Quizlet where you kind of create your own flashcards, things that you say, oh, I may not remember this, as a way to keep going back and like hitting on those areas that, you don't know as well and just need to keep going back. So some type of flashcard type of studying was helpful for me.
Yeah,
And I would say for me, the audio of it was just a repetition because again, every
got it.
time I was in my car, one of the review courses was playing. And so hearing the same material, sometimes from different presenters, presented a different way, it's just a constant repetition of the information. And a lot of it just depends on the material as well. There's
Yeah.
certain things in the probate code that you can listen to and understand, where something like maybe the tax apportionment, you really need to read through that. It's very hard to
1,000%.
listen to that and retain that information if it's not in front of you.
Yeah, it's hard enough to retain just reading it, let alone having someone drone on with the fortunate
Right.
pieces. And Denise, I thought you shared something really interesting. I earlier about you had a system set up as new cases were coming up that you would literally print the new cases that were
Yes.
in our area of practice and read them. And how did you actually set that up? And did you find that helpful for your prep?
Right. So we get an email every time they release those case summaries. And so if there's a state and trust case, I would ask for a copy of it and I would print it out. It's not enough to rely on the case law summaries that someone else prepares. It's really
Got it.
important to read the facts, understand what the issues were, what was the analysis that the court applied, and what was the result. And I found taking the time to understand that really one, depending on what the issue was in the case, it's a review of substantive material as you're going along. But also, if there's any type of change in the law that might come from that case, it was just very helpful to stay up on recent decisions that may impact,
Yeah.
our practice.
I just was so impressed when you shared that you had this system set up of printing the cases. I think I don't think I took it to that level, but I definitely tapped into, it depends on your circuit and your local bar, but our local bar would have probate case law updates, and I went back for the last couple years to look at those. And then, as everyone talked about on here, about participating in the reptile legislative and case law update as well. So now I want to ask about
Seth, did you have a question?
Yeah,
oh,
no, I
sorry.
was going to add one more,
Yeah,
something else, if that's okay.
of course.
A lot of the exam, particularly the essays, are experiential. And if you're not a litigator, it may be difficult from an experiential standpoint to be able to answer the question. I'm not saying it's hard. So if that's your weakness, make certain you join with someone who is a litigator. Ask if you can sit second seat. Look at all the pleadings that are going on. And that will be incredibly helpful to pick up because there are certain things you cannot learn from the statutes or from the review
Yeah.
course. You got to learn from doing. If you're a probate administrator or a trust administrator, you're going to know how to do that. But you may not be the planner. So sit in planning meetings so you can hear what the questions are, what the concerns of the clients are, and how the planner came up with the answer to that. If that's not your strong point.
I think that's really helpful because I don't think we often think about other practitioners as a resource as well in preparation for this exam. And for those who are a part of a firm that has a practice group that's not just you as a solo, you have it right there that if someone is they're more heavily a planner, like you said, or a litigator, that's an opportunity to be like, can we talk about tortious interference and undue influence cases and how you actually try to revoke a probate and challenge a will and I think that's a good thing to remind. And for those who are solo practitioners, that's an opportunity, whether it's through your local bar, through Reptile, to have that sit down with someone who is in your area but focuses slightly different to fill in the gaps of where you may be lacking. This is a good opportunity, Seth, while I have you up. We had two questions. One, I don't think that you can answer specifically, which is how heavily do you test income tax, which I'm assuming means income tax of trusts and estates, or as may be related to, um, part of the estate planning, maybe basis planning. How heavy is that tested? And
I can't really answer
right,
this
that's
specifically.
okay.
I mean, it's tested, but income taxes is not as important as estate and gift taxes are.
Okay. Okay. It is on that it's on that document, that list that I showed screen shared of here's all the topics up for being tested. And that's helpful to hear as far as in the tax realm, estate gift GST is going to be a more significant testing area than income tax, perhaps, but it is still there. It affects us. And as someone who's a planner, especially with exemptions as high as they are now, income tax is part of what we have to keep in mind. Another question for you, Seth, while I have you up, is in the essay questions, does the test taker need to cite to specific statutes or case law in their essay? And how does that affect the scoring?
No.
No. Okay. It's a part of that. We don't need you to show that you've proved to us that you've memorized the citation. Show us you know what the
Exactly.
law is and what to do with it. Okay, that's helpful. Because as a test taker, and I did ask, I'm glad someone asked this because I asked this in the preparation course before I took it, that same question. Because I wanted to know, do I need to have some of these things memorized or am I just in there answering and telling you I know what the law is? I think that's a perfect segue too about all of us, who have taken this exam. I've heard, other people say, man, the number one thing you need to do is to read the probate code, the trust code from front to back, every word and read it through. And some of us did on this panel and some of us didn't, or we did and didn't find it helpful. So I'd like to ask each of you, our panelists, did you take that approach? Was it helpful? Why or why not? And any, recommendations you would have for our test takers about that advice. And Rebecca, we can start with you on that one.
Sure. So yeah, I certainly had heard the review course presenters, more than one suggest that as a study method. So I did try it. I did not get all the way through because I realized I was not absorbing the information. I would get too distracted or let my mind wander. So that's just me. I realized that that was not beneficial to me. So it was easier just focusing on an outline, just high level. And then of course, if there's a specific statute or area that I needed to take a deeper dive in, then, go back to that statute and read it, carefully and annotate again, where helpful type of thing. So, but no, I did not ever read the codes front to back.
Front to back. So it sounds like you in the reading was more selective as you were working through particular topics and kind of using more the materials and outlines, supplementing with your reading of the code rather than letting the reading of the code drive your preparation. Is that a fair
Right. And
summary?
you
Yeah.
just got to know how you learn, how you best absorb
Yeah.
and take in that information. So
Denise, how about you? How did the suggestion of read the code front to back, how did that play into your prep and
Oh,
what was your experience? Did you use
I
it?
have a very marked up copy of my Florida probate code
Yes.
that I spent so much time with this that it's so hard for me to, just throw it away. But I learned by writing and I learned by annotating. So for me, reading through the Florida statute, the Florida probate code, the rules, the trust code, and we don't want to forget there are parts of our practice that are not just located in the probate code and the trust codes.
Yes.
I also had to read through the Uniform Transfer of Minors Act, the powers of appointment, powers of attorney. There are all these other statutes that are related to our practice that you don't want to forget to read. And for me, just going through them and dissecting it, that's how I was able to retain that information.
Yeah. I think a couple of us had our statute book looked similar for the exam. I still have mine as well with all the tabby do's and and the annotations in there. So when you sat down to okay, I'm going to dive in through 733 on administration,
Right.
were you doing that together with an outline? And like how did you approach the annotation part of it as you were
Right.
working through the statute?
So I would read through, and if it would reference a different statute, I would, take the time, go look at what that says, and then maybe make notes that maybe impact how I read that statute. I would really only look at other materials if I didn't understand what the statute says. Because if I could read what the law is and understand it, that's okay. But if I had a question, or if I knew that there was a case law out there where maybe might impact how that statute's interpreted. And again, that's also why it's helpful to read some of the case law, some of the recent case law, because if they reference a specific statute and the court interprets it a particular way, it's good to know and maybe make a note of that for when you're reading through. And again, it's just, you just break it up. And, I guess Rebecca said, after a while, your eyes just kind of like, your mind wanders, especially with some of the longer statutes. So it's just a matter of, okay, this is what I'm going to focus on today, give it a few minutes. And then if I get bored or I find I'm not focusing anymore, do something else.
Yeah. Joe, how about you? The read the code front to back. How did that work into your studying and what was helpful?
That's how I started when I got into
Okay.
after the exam, was reading through the probate trust code and rules. I did some same thing, annotating and kind of reading it and outlining it. So I think overall, yes, I found it was helpful, but it was a tremendous amount of time. And
Mm-hmm.
I found it the most helpful was in addressing the multiple choice questions.
Got it.
In hindsight, with what Seth shared earlier, when you're looking at kind of the point allocation, yes, it definitely helped with the multiple choice, but I didn't find it as necessary in getting through the essays. So I don't know if I could,
Yeah.
if I would have dedicated as much mental time towards just a straight read through of all that.
Yeah. That's really helpful in kind of pairing together how the exam is structured and graded with what resources and the way you approach it, making them marry each other correctly. So it sounds like you also annotated your code book some. Did you have your annotated book with you at the exam? How did you approach the annotations? Were you using other materials along with your reading of the statute at the same time? Like, or did you kind of do it separate like Denise did, where she's like, I'm in the code or I'm listening to materials?
It was mostly reading it and then looking, like if there's something I wasn't sure on, then looking to another resource to try to understand, the proper interpretation, or, same thing like the apportionment and stuff. Like it's one thing when you read it in the code, but then like, let me see how this is actually going to work in a real life scenario.
Yeah, I think this is helpful to hear different approaches of being driven by the materials, supplementing with reading the code together. Everybody sounds like they did annotations versus reading through the statute and supplementing as needed along the way. But the fact that everybody across the board, we use both in some way, shape, or form. We used materials available to us, the review course, other local bar or recent case law update materials, and we use the actual statute book, rule book at the same time. And it's kind of fitting them both in so they're working together. But I think it's good to know about having the annotations and you can take them into the exam. I found that helped. There was something comes up that you read and you're like, I know, I put that on, and I've got it tabbed all ready to go to 733, whatever your code site is. Um, Thinking about the essays, Joe, 'cause you made a good point about the point allocation and how the statute reading may not be the best part for essay prep. Um, how did each of you guys prepare for the essays? Did you practice writing any full essays did you do it under time conditions? Did you make any outlines? Was there anything you did in your preparation that was specifically geared towards how I'm going to tackle and prepare for the essays on the exam? I don't know, Denise, if you want to go first for us on that one.
I actually didn't. For me, it was just more focusing on the materials. I find just from, having taken bar exams, I test better with essays. So for me, it's just as long as I understand the material, I can prepare a response.
Yeah. Joe, what about you? Did you do anything specifically designed to prepare for essays?
I did not, other than reviewing the essay example questions that were provided and reviewing, kind of going through those. I do think, again, in hindsight, it would have been useful to look at, we get all of those topic lists that we know that they can take, even just do a bullet point outline, because having been, 10 years removed from taking an exam or more than 10, getting back in that mindset, I think was a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah. Rebecca, what about you? Was there anything you did specifically in preparation for essays on the exam?
Yeah, same. I did not do any write out any practice essays again, other than looking at the samples, reading through those just to see how, those are structured and answered.
Yeah. And I think for myself, I looked through, kind of like Joe was saying, I looked through the topics that were up for testing. And there were some I don't know for sure, I hadn't taken the exam yet, but there were some I thought were ripe for an essay. So there were things I knew that if I had to dice it out, like elective share or apportionment or, some of the tax planning or something, putting together an estate plan for a client. I didn't write out an essay, but I did put together a couple little outlines and make sure, like I did a practice run of, I made up a client scenario, an estate scenario, and worked through the elective share statute and was like, well, hopefully if I've gone through it one time with a random group of assets and things, I can, it'll be easier if that were on there. But obviously you don't know what the topics are gonna be. Okay, so now I want to turn our attention for a few minutes on actual exam day, the day before exam day prep, how it all goes down. And so, as was discussed at the very beginning, the test takers, you have the option to either take the test remotely, and now remotely means you're doing it from home. It's not just that you're doing it on your computer, but you're doing it from home, or you can take it in person at the exam site. And between our panelists, we have a diversity of how people took the exam. So can each of you kind of share how you took it and why you made that decision? Do you feel like you made the right decision on to take it in person or remotely? And Joe, why don't we start with you?
I took it remotely because I can type much faster than I can write. My handwriting is terrible, and I didn't want to risk someone not being able to read what I'm trying to say. So there's no option for me. Typing was
Yeah. You stand by your decision.
I'll say I did take it remotely. So I did take the exam more than once. I didn't pass on the first time. And so when I took it the first time, it was 2020 and remote was during COVID. So actually remote was the only option. So I at least was familiar with doing it that way. So I, decided to keep that way. But it is a little nerve-wracking, being worried about some internet failure, or
Yeah.
because you have all sorts of warnings, that it's a done deal. If you lose connection, you can't upload your question. So there's a little bit of, stress related to that. So, yeah, you just want to make sure you have good internet connection. There's no potential issues there. Because I lost the internet connection, I think, like very shortly. And as it was
Yeah.
ending and it was, you're supposed to upload your question, you have so much time, and it kind of stalled a little bit, and it eventually did it, so it was fine, but it was one of those panic moments. So that is the trade-off of doing it remotely.
Denise, before we go to you on that point, Joe, I know you wanted to share some insight on for those who are taking it remote, because you just did this last year, so you're the freshest on. You get an opportunity ahead of time to like test it out, right? So how did you incorporate that? Did you feel like that helped ease the anxiety for test day? Like, how did that work?
Yeah, absolutely. They send some links beforehand to do sample to get familiar with the way the test structure is going to look online. So you can go through and see how their example multiple choice, example essays, but they have nothing to do with our subject matter, right? But it's an opportunity to see how the system works. So absolutely, I would have regretted had I not looked at it the day before walking in, because you can learn how to select answers, how to strike through answers like on multiple choice, how to flag them. And the system's actually very efficient in that regard. So when you're going through, if you narrow two off, you can mark them, make your selection, and then flag it. So if you have time, you've made your best guess, you can go back and easily see every question you flagged and navigate through it. You
Yeah.
can paste. There's a lot of things just to go and mess around with. So when you're in there taking the exam, you're not wasting time. You already know how to operate it. So your time is focused on the actual questions and responses and not how to navigate the system.
Agreed. I think that is so helpful. If anyone is taking it remote, do all the rando week before day, I don't remember how far out it was, steps of log on, test it, write some random things, practice uploading it so that you know you're going to be able to do it correctly on exam day. For our remote takers, Joe, Rebecca, a question in the chat. Did y'all just use your laptop? Did you have any other large screen or double screen setup? And was that a part of how you took it remotely?
I did have my setup does have two large screens, but the program only, if I recall correctly, allowed using one screen.
Okay. Okay. So it wasn't helpful that you had a two screen setup in your house or whatever. The program is going to be set up for one screen, but you weren't on your laptop. You had an actual computer screen.
Top was connected, but with
Got it.
the stays, there was an option where you can actually break out in
Okay.
like sections. And again, if you practice and you go in there, you'll get an opportunity to try
Okay.
this. But otherwise, there's kind of the question and then your answer, and you could actually break it up so that you could see the question and the answer as well. And I think there was even like a scratch pad where you could be typing stuff to refer.
Wow.
Again, so definitely get in when they offer it and mess around with it so you can get comfortable.
So I think for those who are interested in what is their screen computer setup going to be, that's the importance of getting that practice time and that's where you can find out how the software works with what your setup is. Rebecca, did you use your laptop or did you have any multi-screen setup or anything, big screen?
No, I just had my laptop, and again, I think like Joe, I'm not sure if that would have been an
Yeah.
option as far as how the system works. I will say, I think, and this is more of like a personal thing and maybe even obvious, but depending on your laptop, like I don't trust my whole trackpad, so I at least have like a mouse, connected because it's easier to use, say, the mouse connected to your laptop, and maybe even a separate keyboard. So anything that kind of just make as far as devices or, that makes it easier, to type and change your answers and so forth. I, certainly recommend making that setup as easy as possible that you have. Yeah.
Yeah. Denise, I saved you for last because you're our sole in-person
Yeah.
test taker.
Yeah.
But I love that we get to hear the different experience. So what played into your decision to take it in person and how did that work? What did it look like? How did you go and
So
take the exam as an in-person taker?
yeah, well, I took it pre-COVID. So at that time, even if you were taking it on your laptop, you still had to go in person
Got it.
and sit in the room where the people were typing their answers. So I decided to handwrite it. For me, I learn by writing. So again, I wrote out two bar exams. Like I can write out another exam. It's no problem. Now I didn't take into account that, it's probably like 10 years since I had to handwrite a bar exam. But for me, it was easier because I had the exam and I could do bullet points, here are the key things I need to respond. And then I was limited to, I don't have all this time to flush out a long essay. Here are the key points I need to focus on in my answer. So that, helped me from just throwing out everything that I could
Yeah.
possibly think of.
Yeah.
So that approach did work for me. Again, it just depends on each person and what works best for them.
And how far in advance did you go to the actual test where the test was going to be taken?
So I'm in Naples at the time the test was in Tampa, so I drove up the day before.
Yeah. I think that's helpful tying in with Seth's point about what's expected on the essays and that this isn't the chance to throw spaghetti at the wall and hope that you get points for every noodle that's on there, right? Is that for you, handwriting kind of helped you stay focused on I can only write so fast and I'm only
Right.
be able to focus on what the question is. Whereas if for those of us that are fast typers, it might make it harder to wrangle in and stay on point. So a question that was in my queue and is in the Q&A queue, which is perfect, which is how did each of you guys approach like moving through multiple choice and essays on the exam? And each of those, again, we have a 4 hour block in the morning, a 4 hour block in the afternoon. Did you run through start to finish as it came up? Did you look at essays, come back, flag questions? So how did each of you approach the actual taking of the exam? And Denise, while you're up, why don't you go
Yeah.
and start us off?
So the multiple choice questions vary in length. So, if I got to a question that was half a page or longer, I skipped it and went towards the shorter multiple choice questions and see, okay, can I answer this? And I just try to knock out as many where I was 100% sure what the answer was. And then I went back and read through, because sometimes the longer ones, chances are you know the answer to. It's just a really long fact pattern you have to get through.
Yeah.
So I went through those, and then anything that I just wasn't 100% sure, I just left it and then went to the essay and tried to focus on the essay time. And then if I had time left over, I would go back and then just try to fill out something for the multiple choice that I didn't
Yeah.
know or wasn't 100% sure on. But usually for the multiple choice, you're able to narrow it to at least two answers.
Yeah. Joe, how about you? How did you actually approach the mechanics? You were remote, our most recent test taker. How did you approach the mechanics of moving through multiple choice and essays?
So in the system, it allows you to set like timers. So you can have a timer set up in there. So I had prior to the exam kind of allocated how much time I would dedicate to the multiple choice, and I did
Wow.
by a factor of the percentage that it makes up in the grading scale. So I set a timer basically, and the intent was to stick to it, and hopefully to get ahead of it on the multiple choice. Then
Yeah.
I went through the multiple choice in order and tried to put an answer down for at least everything, strike through using the strike through feature of anything I eliminated, and flag questions I wanted to come back to. And there was a feature where you could hit flag only and it would just pull up your lineup of flag questions. So it was very, very easy to quickly get back through it. When I got to the multiple choice questions, I kind of read them in order and answered them in order as long as I was comfortable on the topic.
The essays, you read them in order and then tried to approach them in order.
First essay, and if I was comfortable with it, I dove right into the response. I didn't look at the second and third. I know in the afternoon I hit an essay where I wasn't comfortable with the topic, so I skipped that and then went on to the second and third, and then I came back to that one and spent the remainder of my time trying to work through it.
Yeah. Rebecca, how about you? You were also a remote taker and had the benefit of the kind of the software. Did you use some of those features too and how you approached the working through multiple choice and essays?
Yeah, similar to Joe, I don't recall using their timer, but I definitely ahead of time knew how much time I was going to devote to each and stuck with it because
Yeah.
I feel that's probably one of the big reasons why I didn't pass the first time. I ran out of time.
Yeah.
Just spending too much time on one essay and then not having enough time for the next essay. So I knew I need to stick with that time limit. And part of that was, this may kind of verge into another question, but my most difficulty was in typing. This is the trade-off, and where Denise, I think, was maybe smart in writing, is I felt like I need to write it the perfect sentence. It was very hard for me. I'm a writer, so it was very hard for me just to kind of bullet point and not make sure worry about everything being grammatically correct. I had a hard time with that, so I had to like force myself. And that was, I think I realized that the first time around, you can't do that. You're going to run out of time. You do not have time to work, to write the perfect essay, perfect sentences. So really just focusing on even bullet points, type of thing, just to get the information out there. And then again, staying in your allotted time frame for each essay, making sure you have enough time. And I chose not to read like ahead on the different essays because I felt like I would have been distracted. I'll start thinking of that one while I'm still trying to, answer this one. So I did not go ahead. I just took each one as I read it for the first time and, answered it, just within the time I allotted.
That's really helpful. I like how y'all kind of brought this together of marrying what we heard as far as this is how the exam grading works. These are where the points are. This is where they are throughout the exam. And that both of you, Rebecca and Joe, had said you already had a plan ahead of time, which is this is how much time I have for my multiple choice. This is how much time I have for my essays. And I know that if I don't do my best, at least to try to stick to this allocation, you're missing out on points of the table. There's 24 points, or I can't remember the exact number on each of these essays. And if you don't get to one or you don't get to all of it, you have no opportunity to get to those points. I know I loved the flag and the strikeout feature, and I did the same thing. I wanted to get through those multiple choice, knock out what I knew, flag what I didn't, and get over to those essays. And I did not have as good of a time structure as Joe did on an exact plan, but tried to stay mindful of the fact that, again, if you don't get to all the pieces, you're never going to get to all the points. We're in our last 6 minutes here, so I want to shift to Q&A. So I'm going to look at what's still in our queue, and if there's any questions that our attendees still have, please put them in there, and we'll try to get to everything we can. Seth, I know a couple of the questions are specifically to you. Do you, and you may not, and if you don't know the answer, do you know when will the takers find out if they pass? I recall, I think it was around August. It was a few months after. Do you know specifically kind of when that has to come out?
It's the end of July, August. I really don't know
Yeah.
the answer to that question, but it's later than you would want.
No matter what the date is, it's going to be later. You want to know tomorrow, right? And I see we had a question about the details of the 2-day Wills Trust and Estates review course. And I will, after this is over, I can reach out to Jeremy, who is a part of the staff for the Reptile, and have him maybe. I'm volunteering. I think he could circulate when that's going to go live. I thought it already was, but it sounds like it's not. But you're correct. It's coming up in March. But I will help get that answer and get it out to the group. Okay.
Rachel, I feel like I've definitely seen,
Okay.
like on the
Get
two, if you're a member of the section, you should, if you get those emails on the Tuesday email, there's definitely been a registration there.
Okay.
And I'm thinking you could go on the website, the Reptile website, and see upcoming CLE. And
Yeah.
so there should be
If
a
it's there.
registration there. I think I'm almost positive.
That's where I would go, is on the Reptile upcoming CLE, because I know they already go out way further than just that date. Okay, so Seth, can you repeat for our audience what you had said in the beginning about the people, what you see on the pass rate on the multiple choice versus the essay, and kind of what your message was with that?
I did say 95% of the people in the past 2 years passed the multiple choice. Okay.
Yes.
It may not be 95. It may have been 90 or 85, but we're talking about a significant number. That was not what kept people from passing. On the
Okay.
other hand, is only 21% of the people passed the exam the past 2 years. So that tells you something, how important those essays are.
Yeah, where is the gap? If everybody who's 95% of the people taking it are with flying colors on the multiple choice, but only 20% are passing, we know where where we're falling short on the exam taking. That's really helpful. Are are there, I don't know if you can speak to this, are there any future plans or discussion to bifurcate the exam in some way, or I'm going to say modify the format of the exam that would allow test takers to focus on a more specific area under the broad wills, trust, and estates versus covering everything from planning, admin, litigation, and tax?
Yes, and it's before the BLSC right now.
Got it.
So,
Very
so I
timely
can,
question. This is a hot
yes,
topic and is being discussed. So.
that was heavily debated in our committee because we know who the planners are. We know who the tax people are, not personally. We can
Yeah.
tell by the way they and so on.
Answer
Yeah.
the questions. You can
Exactly.
see. So I think that's interesting to hear from the committee's point of view, in addition to the differences between multiple choice and either you're crushing it on the essays or not. You can also sense often a test taker is either winning over here on the planning or tax side, or leans heavily administration, litigation, and that is a discussion on a different format or bifurcation that may allow the test takers to focus in on their area more than everything. So way to be on point, Hunter. Um, does anyone know, especially I guess our remote takers or Seth, can you print the questions if you're taking the exam remotely? So while you're in the software, can you print the question? I don't remember that feature being on there. Joe, you seem to have known the software the best.
I did not see a print option.
I didn't see that.
Locked your computer up where it's not doing anything but letting you.
And even in person, you have to hand in your scratch paper. So you're not leaving that room with any information about the exam or the questions that were on there.
Yeah. And I think I remember, I may be wrong, Joe, Rebecca. I feel like when you logged in remotely, you're on the camera for a minute, and then you had to like display what was there. I had, it was like I have my code book. Here's my one piece of scratch paper. Did you guys have to do that? I think that probably goes towards you probably can't print it because you got to show your universe of what you have.
Yeah, I remember there were rules as to what you could have there, and I was super paranoid because I took it in my office, so I cleared everything that like off my desk, and I panned my camera around and held up my book and my
Yeah,
three blank white pieces of paper before the morning and afternoon session started. So,
perfect.
I think because you had to leave your camera on during the time, so it's not like you are left on your own to figure out how to. Yeah, your camera was on the whole time, so they know what you're looking at and what's around you. Yeah, and what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a question, can you use the restroom if you take the test remotely? Yes, you can. But first of all, you have that break, okay? So you have your 4 hour trunk break, 4 hour, I think it was 4 hours each chunk. And I did use the restroom in the middle of one of them, but I remember it was kind of awkward. I don't know, Rebecca or Joe. I think I was like, I'm getting up to use the restroom now, and then, came back. But I think I tried my best not to have to move out of my space for any reason.
I did not because I can't remember if it was during the board cert. They said there's certain things because it's like AI that will flag you for a
Yes.
review. And I don't know if Seth might know or the specifics or how it works, but I was paranoid, so I didn't. So I was very like conscientious, even like to the amount of water I was drinking, getting up into. So I did not leave.
Yeah.
I, I,
Um,
I do not know the answer, Joe. That's something that those are bar rules with respect to
yeah.
how the exams are
Yeah.
done.
Denise said, as an in-person test taker, I'm assuming there was a procedure if you needed to get up to leave to go to the restroom.
I don't remember because again,
Yeah.
you're crunched for time.
Yeah.
So
You're
I
just,
would have, yeah, I'm like, I will hold it for the break because nothing's going to pry me away from this exam in the middle of it.
yeah. Okay, so this is going to be our last question, and then I'm going to wrap us up here because we are 2 minutes over time. So question from Allison, when will we receive official notice that our application was accepted and we're approved to sit for the exam? Do you know that answer, Seth, on when that happens?
I was going to say sometime around the middle of November because application deadline is October 31st.
That
We try,
sounds, yeah, that sounds correct. You got your application in by October 31st, and then I don't remember how long it was, but I feel like it was plenty of time between finding out and being able to register for the review course and start your studying for the exam to sit for it in May. Um, so I think we've covered everything. Does anyone, our panelists, one last chance? Is there anything you want to add as just before these people leave, you must hear this piece of advice or anything on the exam?
Well, not to the exam. I do want to point out that this is an option for some people. I was initially approved to sit for the 2016 exam, and as I got closer to the exam date, I felt I'm not prepared for this. So there is you're not automatically approved to sit for the following year, but if you're approved to sit in 1 year, you can do an abbreviated application to sit for the following year. And so I took advantage of that, and for me that helped because I knew I was not prepared to sit for in 2016.
That is great advice. So getting the application in, and if you feel like, especially if life happens, something comes
Right.
up, right? That you have the opportunity to do this abbreviated application process to go for the next year.
And I would say for the person with the comment, there is a Florida Bar contact for the committee, the exam committee. Email the Florida Bar contact if you haven't heard, and then the Florida Bar contact should help you.
Perfect.
And I would say, just from the exam perspective, that I do not think this was the kind of exam you could just walk into without having studied and pass. I don't think practicing alone is going to be sufficient to get you through. So if you're going to take the exam just because you want to see it, that's fine. But if you don't put, whatever your study method is, everyone's different. I don't, think passing is a realistic expectation to have. I mean, that's why Seth said there's 21% average pass rate the last 2 years. So I do think, take it seriously. Like Denise said, if you don't feel prepared, you can potentially, post it, to the next exam session. Because it's just not something I felt like if I didn't prepare, I would have passed otherwise.
Yeah,
Other
that's really
I
helpful.
would just emphasize is look at the practice exams. I looked at it before I started and the essay questions, and then I didn't get back to them till like literally the night before the exam. And I wish I would have circled back to them much sooner to start thinking more about the essays and the structure and the formatting.
Yeah. And that's specifically what I had shown on the screen share is that sample page that's on the board cert part of the Florida Bar website. Okay.
What?
I was
So
going to
lobby your board of governors to spend some money on advertising to the general public why people should go see a board certified attorney.
Nice.
Mm.
Agreed.
Make it all worthwhile becoming board certified.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I
Rebecca.
was going to add real quick, just and not don't think you're going to walk into the exam having time to look at your code book. So yes, annotate them, yes, tab them, but maybe think you might get a chance to look at one thing. You know, it's there as a security, and maybe those 1 or 2 extra points you're going to get by zeroing in, but you are not going to have time to be looking through those code books and statutes.
Yeah. You guys, thank you so much for your time. I hope this is helpful for all our attendees. I'm going to go ahead and log us off now. Be looking for, go ahead and go online to the Reptile website. Be looking for future emails about signing up for the review course. As you heard from all of us, it was an important part of our preparation. And we wish you the best of luck for those who are going to sit for the exam this year or in the future. Thank you so much.